So the fact that the dot module function behaves differently depending on the arguments, right? It's nothing new. Certainly in other languages we have overloads, right? Where you can have you can have functions that behave one way or another depending on the number of arguments. Yes, but there is no overloading in JavaScript, right? But nevertheless, it's behaving as if it were overloaded, right? Meaning that depending on the arguments, it behaves one way or another. Right? It's actually a clever implementation of the function, of the dot module function, that it looks at the arguments, and depending on whether it has one argument or two arguments, it behaves one way or another inside of the same function. Right? So it's not overloading the way we know it in Java or .NET and whatnot. Okay? It's just that inside of the function, it's a smart function that knows what to do one way or another. Yes? The other thing that I'd like to point out is that usually in other languages we would use setters and getters for various operations, right? For if we were writing, we would use a set. If we are reading, we would use a get. Yes, it's a very common pattern in other programming languages. In JavaScript, although you could follow that same pattern, it's more common to use the same function for read and write, right? But it behaves as a read if you have maybe just one argument, and it behaves as a write if it has two or more arguments. You know, it's a very common design pattern, right? That we'll look at later on when we get to jQuery and other libraries. It's a very common way of writing setters and getters in JavaScript. Yes. In this case, the dot module, because it has one argument, is being interpreted as a read. You know, retrieve the module. Okay. All right, so let's keep working on this. Another common pattern in JavaScript is that here we have a variable that is being used in several places, like this. You know, we have the variable, and then which is the result of having invoked this module, and then using the same module over and over for declaring the controllers, two controllers, and a config. Yes, right. So a very common pattern in JavaScript that not all libraries support, but the advanced ones do, and certainly Angular does, is that it allows you to do the following. This module function returns the app. That makes sense, yes? But when you call the controller on the same variable, this controller function also returns app. In this control, obviously, it also returns app. And this config also returns app, meaning it returns the instance of the original module on which these things are being declared on. Right? What this allows us to do is the following. You can remove the app, right, and then use this following syntax. Dot controller, dot controller, and dot config. See that? It's a little bit less verbose, right? It's a little more tight, the implementation, but it's a very, very common pattern, right, in JavaScript libraries, right, where each function returns the initial instance, right, on which that you're operating. We're operating on what? We're operating on what this returns. This returns an instance of the module, and we are calling on that a dot controller function. And the controller function again returns the original module, so that we can again call dot controller on it. See that? So this controller function returns again the instance of the original module, so that we can call config on it again. See that? Right, that's a very, very common pattern in JavaScript in general, right? And it's you have to write the functions to behave that way. Okay, it's not for free, right? So somebody wrote these functions in such a way that it would create this convenience for us. Yes, everybody okay? Right. So if I come back and I refresh my page, it still works, right? I haven't broken my page, so it still works exactly the same way. right? We call this strategy of stringing together these functions. We call them chaining the functions together. Okay, and a typical question on an interview might be, write me a function that would allow me to chain these functions together. Okay, because it's not for free. They have to write it in such a way, right? And we'll look at how to do that a little later.